Welcome to True Echo, where real hearts beat behind the headlines. In today's gripping story, a black CEO quietly returns to his roots, only to uncover a cruel plot within the walls of the very diner he built from the ground up. But what starts as heartbreak soon becomes a battle for dignity, truth, and justice. Stay with us as we reveal how a man who once had nothing used wisdom, compassion, and power to protect a legacy that almost slipped away. The late afternoon glow painted Houston's skyline in bronze as Marcus Johnson tugged the brim of his cap lower, stepping across the familiar threshold of Johnson's diner. 15 years ago, he had started this place with nothing but ambition, a borrowed loan, and a stubborn belief that even a poor black man from the Fifth Ward could create a haven where everyone, no matter their race, age, or status, would be treated like family. But lately, the numbers hadn't added up. Slipping profits, rising turnover, and odd customer complaints marked the flagship location as off. Something had changed, something rotting beneath the surface. So Marcus did what few CEOs would ever consider. He returned undercover, stripped of power, dressed in a faded flannel shirt and worn jeans, hoping to feel the pulse of the place he once called home. He wasn't greeted with smiles this time. The bell above the door chimed, but no one looked up. No, Mr. Johnson. No warm hello from the regulars. Just the clatter of plates, the sharp sizzle of bacon, and hollow chatter. Sliding onto a stool at the counter, Marcus tried to blend in. His coffee arrived lukewarm with no eye contact. Servers moved like ghosts, their smiles forced, eyes darting. But one moment made his breath catch, a soft sigh from a young waitress, her shoulders slumped, eyes distant. The place had lost its soul. Then he saw him, Henry Lawson, the elderly dishwasher with snow-white hair and a back that bent with time but never with bitterness. Quietly, methodically, Henry scrubbed dishes with the same care Marcus remembered from a decade ago. He smiled at everyone. Never asked for thanks. When a spoon clattered to the floor, Henry bent to retrieve it with a joke and a wink. Yet Marcus noticed the looks. Megan Price, the lead cashier, barely concealed her annoyance when Henry passed. Troy Miller, a smirking young man with slick hair and cold eyes, laughed quietly when Henry offered to cover a short bill. And when they thought no one was listening, Marcus heard it. He's ancient, Megan hissed. Clings to this place like it's all he's got. Troy chuckled. Maybe it is. I mean, he sleeps in that busted trailer behind the lot, right? They laughed. Marcus's grip on the coffee mug tightened. His knuckles whitened. This wasn't just disrespect, it was contempt, carefully cloaked in smiles. He knew this kind of rot. It always started small. A whisper. A sigh. Then it metastasized until good people were pushed out. The old man they mocked had once been the beating heart of the diner. Now, they treated him like a stain. Marcus had seen it too many times, how the world twisted kindness into weakness. But not today. Today, Marcus wouldn't just watch. He'd listen. He'd wait. And when the truth came out, he'd tear this whole illusion down brick by brick. Because Johnson's diner didn't belong to Troy and Megan. It belonged to men like Henry. And justice, true justice, was coming. The sky outside dimmed to a deep amber as the dinner rush approached. Inside, the neon buzz of Johnson's diner glowed like a tired memory, a place once full of life now haunted by something Marcus couldn't yet name, but could feel with every tense breath. He stayed in his seat, sipping his bitter coffee and watching. Watching the small things most people miss, the glance exchanged between Megan and Troy every time Henry passed, the way other staff members avoided the elderly dishwasher like he carried something contagious. It was all wrong. The warmth that had once defined the place had been replaced with cold calculation. Then came the moment Marcus wouldn't forget. A young mother named Amy Turner entered with her 2 small children. He remembered her from years ago, back when she worked 2 shifts and barely made rent. She'd always been kind, tired, but kind. Now she looked even more exhausted, her kids clinging to her coat as she guided them to a table. They ordered modestly, grilled cheese, a milkshake split between two, and when the bill came, Amy hesitated. Her fingers fumbled with coins and crumpled bills, her cheeks flushing as she counted twice. Still short. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Megan, whose fake smile faltered into something sharper. "Maybe take off the drinks?" Before Megan could respond with more than an eye roll, Henry appeared like a ghost from the past. "I've got it," he said softly, pulling out a few worn bills from his apron. "Let the kids eat well tonight. Tomorrow might be better." Amy's eyes widened. She tried to refuse, but Henry's kind grin silenced her. "My wife used to say, if you can help someone eat, you do it. Simple as that." Customers nearby heard and smiled, quiet nods of respect. But behind the counter, Megan sneered and turned to Troy. "At this rate, he'll go broke saving everyone," she whispered. Troy smirked. "Good. Maybe then we won't have to push him out. He'll leave on his own." Marcus's heart pounded. Not out of fear, but rage. This wasn't petty workplace gossip. It was targeted cruelty. Henry's compassion was being weaponized against him. Then Troy said something that chilled Marcus to the bone. "My cousin's about to get laid off. All I need is a reason to fire Henry. One more cash shortage pinned on him, and boom, we hire my guy and split the referral bonus." Megan nodded with quiet malice. "He's too trusting. Just wait. We'll make it look like he's skimming." That was it. They weren't just mocking Henry, they were actively framing him. Marcus didn't speak. Didn't flinch. But in that moment, he made a decision. No more silent observation. No more hoping the problem would fix itself. He would expose them. All of it. In public. And he wouldn't do it with anger, he'd do it with undeniable proof. So he began his plan that very night. Once Henry slipped out the back, stooped and exhausted, carrying the same battered backpack he'd had for years, Marcus quietly followed. He didn't go to a nearby apartment as some assumed. Instead, Henry trudged across the lot, past the dumpsters, and opened the door of a rusted-out trailer parked in the shadows. Its windows were taped against the cold, the roof patched with scrap metal. Inside flickered a single dim light. Marcus stopped, heart heavy. That was where Henry lived. A man who gave everything to others, who never asked for help, living in a shack while others plotted his downfall. He stepped back into the shadows, not wanting to be seen. Not yet. He needed more. Just then, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis, an elderly couple who had been long-time regulars, approached, surprised to see Marcus still lingering. They recognized him, even in disguise. "You checking on Henry?" Mrs. Lewis asked, her voice soft. Marcus nodded. "He's a good man," Mr. Lewis added. "Doesn't want pity. Said he'd rather sleep in that trailer than burden his daughter in Seattle." Marcus's brows furrowed. Why won't he live with her? He promised his late wife he'd stay working and pay off her hospital bills, even now. Pride, maybe. But also love. The word struck deep. Marcus remembered his own mother, pawning their furniture just to keep food on the table. The look in her eyes when he said, "We're okay," even when they weren't. People like Henry carried more than poverty. They carried purpose. And that's what made them dangerous to people like Megan and Troy. Because people with that kind of dignity, quiet, unwavering, unshakable, make the cruel look small. And Marcus knew one thing for certain now. He was going to burn the lie down. By dawn, Marcus Johnson had made his decision. No more hesitation. No more pretending. He was done silently watching the family he built be poisoned from within. He returned home that morning with a singular purpose, to uncover every inch of truth. Not just to save Henry, but to reclaim Johnson's diner from the creeping rot of apathy and deceit. Marcus reviewed old footage from the diner's security cameras. Some angles were too grainy, some too narrow, but one thing was clear: the register discrepancies didn't align with Henry's movements. So he did what any savvy CEO would do: he installed new surveillance. Hidden, high quality, with audio. And then he waited. 3 days later, an opportunity arrived in the form of Jessica Miller, a former regular who had recently lost her job. A single mom, desperate but proud. Marcus remembered how she used to come in every Tuesday, laughing with her daughter over pancakes. But now, things were different. He reached out quietly, explained the situation, and asked for her help. "I won't let you suffer," he promised. "But I need the truth to surface. Not just for Henry, but for everyone like him." Jessica agreed. And so, on a tense Thursday afternoon, Johnson's Diner played host to a scene that would change everything. Jessica arrived with her daughter in tow. They sat in the corner booth, ordered a modest meal, and when the time came to pay, she walked up to the register with trembling hands. Megan was waiting. I'm sorry," Jessica stammered, her voice cracking. "I think I'm short. My card won't go through." Megan didn't even blink. "We don't give away food here," she said sharply, her practiced smile barely masking her scorn. "You can return the kids' meals or wash dishes." Jessica lowered her gaze, her daughter shrinking behind her. And then, just as Marcus had predicted, Henry stepped in. "I've got it," he said, his voice soft but steady. He pulled out a $10 bill from his wallet. "Let the little one eat. I know things get rough. I've been there." Jessica's eyes welled with tears. But the trap had been sprung. Troy, standing nearby, loudly cleared his throat and called out, "Hey, Patricia, we've got another till shortage. Almost $10 again." Patricia Collins, the shift manager, hurried over. Megan leaned in, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It's just strange," she said. "Every time there's a discrepancy, it's when Henry's been by the register." Henry froze. "I didn't," he began. But Megan cut him off. "No one's accusing anyone. But we have to be thorough." Marcus watched from the corner of the diner, disguised as usual, but boiling with anger. This was their plan. Frame him in front of the whole room. Smear his name. Make him look like a sweet old man with sticky fingers. Customers started whispering. A few glanced at Henry with uncertainty. Patricia hesitated. She liked Henry. Everyone did. But the pressure of running a tight operation, combined with multiple unexplained shortages, made her falter. "I'll have to ask you to step back from duties while we investigate," she said, her voice thick with guilt. Henry didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded, pulled off his apron, and laid it on the counter. "I only wanted to help," he whispered. "If that makes me guilty, I accept it." The silence was suffocating. No one stepped up for him. No one defended him. Megan and Troy wore smug expressions, already envisioning their victory. Jessica clutched her daughter, tears slipping down her cheeks as she realized the price of exposing this trap. And Marcus? Marcus stood. He walked slowly to the center of the diner. Removed his cap. And let every eye fall on him. There was a collective gasp. Someone whispered, "Is that?" Patricia's mouth dropped open. Megan went pale. Troy stumbled backward. "I am Marcus Johnson," he said clearly. "Founder of this diner. And for the last week, I've been sitting right here, watching." Gasps rippled through the room. "I built this place for people like Henry," he continued. "For those who get up every day, despite hardship, and serve others with dignity. But what I've seen is betrayal." He pulled a USB from his pocket. "I installed cameras. With audio. Every word, every action, recorded." He handed it to Patricia. Play it. All of it. She rushed to the office. Moments later, the TV above the bar flickered to life. Footage played of Megan deleting transactions. Troy pocketing change. Their whispered plans. Their scheme to frame Henry, clear as day. The room erupted. Gasps. Shouts. Outrage. Patricia turned back to Henry, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Customers rushed outside to find him. Henry, who had stopped at the bus bench, was stunned when they brought him back in. And on the screen, one final clip played, of him quietly paying for another customer's meal weeks ago, with his own money, never asking for thanks. Henry stood frozen, his lip trembling. Marcus stepped forward and laid a hand on his shoulder. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Not now. Not ever." The entire diner stood and applauded. Henry bowed his head. Megan? Troy? They had no defense. And justice had just begun. The energy in Johnson's diner had shifted like a thunderclap. From stunned silence to thunderous applause, the walls echoed with something it hadn't heard in months: truth. Megan Price crumpled into herself, her mascara-streaked face turning from pink to ashen white as she clutched the counter like it might keep her grounded in a world that was crashing down around her. Troy, normally smug and sharp-tongued, stood rigid, lips parted slightly as if he couldn't comprehend the reality confronting him. Marcus didn't flinch. "This place was founded on fairness," he said, turning to face every soul in the diner. "But fairness isn't just a word you hang on a wall. It's the way you treat the janitor, the dishwasher, the server who just lost their apartment. It's what you do when no one's watching." His voice carried the weight of someone who'd once been forgotten, dismissed, and rejected in more places than he could count. "Megan. Troy. You didn't just steal from this business, you tried to bury a man with more honor in his pinky than you'll ever have in your entire lives." A murmur rippled across the room, righteous, furious. Just then, as if summoned by justice itself, two uniformed police officers walked through the door. Marcus had called them hours earlier, confident this moment would come. "Officers," Marcus said, turning to meet them. "The footage is all here. Theft, conspiracy to defraud, and malicious intent to frame an innocent man." The lead officer nodded and stepped forward with calm authority. "We've reviewed the evidence submitted. Megan Price and Troy Miller, you are under arrest for theft and falsifying records with intent to defame." Troy raised his hands in defiance. Wait. This is a misunderstanding." But the second officer was already placing cuffs on Megan, who began to sob. I didn't mean." Neither of them got to finish. Their pleas were drowned out by the murmurs of disgust from patrons, some of whom had once defended them. Now, faces hardened, eyes narrowed, no one looked on with pity. Henry stood in the corner, motionless, lips trembling as though caught in a bad dream. Marcus stepped to him. "You don't deserve this, Henry. You never did." Henry shook his head. I'm not used to anyone fighting for me." "Well," Marcus said, placing a hand over his heart, "get used to it." Applause roared once more as the officers led the former cashiers out. Troy's face was pale, sweat trailing down his temple. Megan's cries faded as the door shut behind them. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to the staff. "To everyone who stood by and said nothing, you may not have raised a hand against Henry, but silence is its own kind of betrayal." Heads lowered. Several workers, especially the younger ones, avoided his gaze. "But we don't fix things with shame. We fix them by doing better." He turned to Patricia Collins, the shift manager. "You doubted him. But you also gave space for the truth to be shown. That matters. And I hope you'll help me rebuild what this place was always meant to be." Patricia blinked away tears and nodded. "Yes, sir. I promise you, I will." Then Marcus faced the entire diner, staff and customers alike. Henry Lawson is not just the dishwasher. He is the soul of Johnson's Diner. And effective immediately, I am promoting him to customer experience manager. Gasps and cheers erupted. You'll train new staff, oversee service quality, and keep this place honest. Your wage is doubled. Full benefits. N. Marcus reached into his jacket, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to Henry. The deed to a house. Yours. No more trailers. No more cold nights. Henry opened the envelope with shaking hands. His eyes widened. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. A soft sob broke from his throat. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Then don't, Marcus said, smiling. Just come to work every day and be who you already are, the best of us. Tears streamed down Henry's cheeks as staff gathered around him, hugging, apologizing, celebrating. Regulars approached with thanks and warm embraces. Even the children, Jessica's daughter among them, wrapped their arms around his legs like he was family. Because now, he was. Outside, the clouds broke just enough for the sun to spill through the diner windows, lighting Henry's face like a spotlight from above. Marcus stood back, watching. This wasn't about publicity. This wasn't even about revenge. It was about restoring what mattered. The quiet heroes. The ones no one sees until it's almost too late. And for Marcus Johnson, it was only the beginning of a greater reckoning. By the next morning, the story of Henry Lawson's redemption had already swept through the Houston community like wildfire. Local news stations picked it up, reporting how the humble dishwasher who'd been framed by conniving coworkers was not only exonerated but promoted. Videos of Marcus Johnson's fiery speech and the footage of Megan and Troy's betrayal had gone viral, earning headlines like, Black CEO exposes cruel plot, uplifts unsung hero, and, kindness wins, the dishwasher who inspired a city. But inside Johnson's Diner, things were quieter. More personal. Henry arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, wearing a crisp new polo with a stitched nameplate that read Manager, H. Lawson. He paused outside the front door, staring at the reflection in the glass, a man he barely recognized. Not because of the uniform, but because for the first time in decades, he felt seen. As he stepped inside, a chorus of cheers erupted from staff and early customers. Patricia greeted him with a warm hug. Welcome home, boss. Even the shyest of the team, teenagers who had once laughed behind his back, now looked to him with respect and gratitude. They offered to carry his clipboard, wiped down counters before he could lift a finger, and sought his guidance on every little thing. And Henry? He didn't lord it over anyone. He walked slowly, greeted each table with a smile, and paused when he noticed a struggling busboy trying to hide tears behind a mop. You okay, son? Henry asked, kneeling beside him. The young man nodded, then shook his head. My mom's sick. We can't afford the meds. Henry patted his shoulder and walked him to the break room. Within minutes, a discreet envelope with 3 crisp $100 bills and a handwritten note, from the Henry Lawson Fund. Tell your mom to rest. You're not alone. Was placed into the boy's locker. Because that's what had happened overnight. With the help of Marcus and the community, the Henry Lawson Fund was created, not just as a tribute to one man's decency, but as a beacon for everyone walking through hardship with no one to catch them. The fund provided emergency support for employees and customers alike, medical bills, rent crises, meal shortages. It was even used to forgive the debts of over 50 customers who had accumulated unpaid tabs during the pandemic. And it wasn't just money, it was policy. Marcus implemented a company-wide shift. Living wages for all staff. Full medical benefits for full-time workers. Paid time off for family emergencies. A no-judgment assistance program for any team member who asked for help. Because if a man like Henry had to sleep in a trailer while saving others, Marcus said to the local press, then we, as a business and a society, have failed. The diner became something more than a restaurant. It became a sanctuary. People traveled from outside the city to eat there. Families left notes on the walls: "Thank you for giving us hope. Because of Henry, I didn't give up. My child ate here for free when I couldn't afford dinner. Bless you all." Henry, overwhelmed by the attention, remained humble. But when a teenage girl came in, tears in her eyes, and said, "You helped my dad when he lost his job," he simply nodded and said, "Then you tell him I'm still here when he needs me." But behind the scenes, Marcus knew this moment was about more than one man. It was about legacy. He sat down with Patricia, Henry, and a few senior team members and said, "We have to codify this into our DNA. Not just programs. Culture. Johnson's Diner must always protect the ones the world overlooks." So they revamped hiring practices, prioritizing compassion over experience. Formerly incarcerated individuals, single parents, seniors pushed out of corporate jobs, they were brought on with mentorship from people like Henry. Every new hire was required to complete a week-long orientation called the Henry Standard, a program based on empathy, respect, and integrity in customer service. "We serve food," Marcus told the new team. "But we're really serving people." And no one lived that truth more than Henry. One evening, a boy came in with his backpack stuffed with clothes. His mother had kicked him out. He had nowhere to go. He asked if he could just sit in the corner booth and stay warm. Henry brought him soup, a blanket from his car, and quietly made a call. By nightfall, Marcus had arranged temporary housing through the local nonprofit the diner now partnered with. The boy, 17 years old, got back on his feet within a month, and returned as a dishwasher, learning from the man who'd saved him. That's when the media really took notice. Not just of the one incident, but of the movement. CNN, NPR, The Washington Post, stories ran about the diner that runs on kindness. School groups visited to learn how business could be run with heart. CEOs came to observe. Local government even declared the following Monday as Henry Lawson Day, an honor Henry accepted with tears and a quivering hand, dressed in his best suit, the same one he wore to his wife's funeral. Standing beside Marcus, he accepted the plaque and said, "All I ever wanted was to do right by others. I didn't have much. But I had enough to share." In that moment, the entire room stood. Not for a title. Not for a resume. But for the quiet dignity of a man who had never stopped believing that kindness matters. And Marcus? He never felt prouder in his life, not of his success, not of the diner, but of the family they'd built. One act of compassion at a time. By the end of the month, Johnson's Diner wasn't just the most talked about restaurant in Houston, it was being studied by universities, nonprofit leaders, and Fortune 500 executives alike. But for Marcus Johnson, all the accolades meant little compared to what he saw each morning at 6 a.m. Henry Lawson, now suited in his new managerial uniform, greeting every person, customer or colleague, as though they were kin. It wasn't the title that changed Henry. It was the dignity of being trusted, of having the power to protect others, just as he'd always tried to do in small, unseen ways. Marcus knew this wasn't just a redemption story. This was a revolution in what leadership looked like. Still, there was unfinished business. One Saturday morning, while reviewing weekly updates in his back office, Marcus received a quiet knock. Patricia stepped in, concern shadowing her face. "There's someone here," she said cautiously, asking for Henry. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Her name is Sarah. Says she's his daughter." Marcus was on his feet before she finished the sentence. Out in the diner stood a woman in her late 30s. Hair pinned neatly, but eyes red from the flight, from the worry, from the guilt. Sarah Lawson had finally come home. Marcus gave her space as she scanned the diner. Her gaze fell on Henry, who was laughing warmly with a child near the condiment stand. "Dad," she called, voice cracking. Henry turned. Time stood still. For a beat, neither moved. Then Sarah sprinted forward and threw her arms around his shoulders. They wept openly, unfiltered and unashamed, clinging to each other in the middle of a crowded diner that suddenly went quiet in respect. "I called and called," she cried. "You always said you were fine. Why didn't you let me help?" Henry held her tighter. "Because I didn't want you to see me like that. I didn't want to be a burden." "You were never a burden," she whispered. "You're my dad." It was a moment that thawed even the hardest hearts in the room. Later, the three of them, Marcus, Henry, and Sarah, sat in the office. Sarah shared how she'd kept tabs on him through local church members and old friends, but Henry always deflected her offers of support. "I didn't know," she said to Marcus. "I didn't know how bad it got." Marcus smiled gently. "He never told you. But he told us. In how he lived. In what he gave when he had nothing." Sarah wiped her eyes and nodded. "I want to be part of this. I want to support this place, this legacy." From that day forward, Sarah became a board advisor to the diner's growing charitable wing, the Lawson Initiative, which focused on housing assistance for elderly low-wage workers, and mentorship for teens aging out of foster care. The impact only grew. Under Henry's guidance, the diner launched kindness credits, allowing customers to prepay meals for those in need, and Second Start Sundays, where the staff ran resume workshops, cooked free breakfasts for the homeless, and offered interviews to people who'd normally be passed over. Local churches sent volunteers. High schoolers came to earn community service hours. And every Sunday, without fail, Henry would give a short morning talk about compassion before breakfast was served. He never quoted philosophers. He never made grand speeches. He'd simply say things like, "You matter." Even if the world forgot. "You matter here." Marcus often stood in the back, arms folded, watching with pride. But he never spoke during those moments. Because this was Henry's pulpit now. One afternoon, a reporter from The Atlantic interviewed Marcus for a piece titled, "What Happens When the Dishwasher Becomes the Leader?" She asked, "Why did you go through so much for one employee?" Marcus leaned back, thoughtful. "Because I was him. I know what it's like to be overlooked. To have people smile at your face but spit on your worth. Henry's been lifting others for years. It was about time someone lifted him." She smiled. "You could have fired Megan and Troy and left it at that." Marcus shook his head. "Justice isn't revenge. It's restoration. It's taking what was broken and making it whole. If I had only punished the guilty but left Henry in that trailer, I'd have failed." That quote went viral. So did the accompanying photo, Henry and Marcus standing side by side, both in their uniforms, both with weathered hands and proud eyes. People began to come not for the food, but for the spirit. For the feeling of hope. For the belief that even in a world full of betrayal and selfishness, good people still had a place. Soon, Johnson's diner expanded, not in size, but in impact. A second location was reopened in the 5th Ward, Marcus's childhood neighborhood, staffed largely by returning citizens and those who'd been turned away elsewhere. Henry trained every last one of them. And on opening day, he gave them just one instruction. Be kind, especially to the one who looks like they don't deserve it. Because those, he said, were the ones who needed it most. By the time spring rolled around, Johnson's Diner had transformed from a simple eatery into something far more meaningful, a living monument to justice, compassion, and second chances. In the mornings, the line outside formed before the doors even opened. Not just because the pancakes were good, though they were, but because people wanted to feel what the place stood for. A place where every hello mattered, where no one was invisible, and where a quiet man named Henry Lawson had become the heart of a movement. Marcus Johnson stood at the back window one day, arms crossed, watching the sunrise cast a golden hue over the brick walls of his first location, the one that had nearly been poisoned from the inside. He sipped his coffee, not with the weight of anxiety anymore, but with a steady peace. That peace was hard-won. Every photo on the wall now told a story, not just of the food or the business, but of the people. There was a framed picture of Henry on Henry Lawson Day, standing with his daughter Sarah and Marcus in front of the new community kitchen they opened 2 blocks down. Another showed a teenage dishwasher grinning proudly in his graduation gown, the same kid Henry had fed and housed months earlier. Another was a quote, framed simply above the counter. "Kindness isn't weakness. It's how strength introduces itself." Marcus turned when Henry approached from behind. "Morning, boss," Henry said with a small smirk. "I think you outrank me now," Marcus chuckled. Henry chuckled too, then grew quiet as he looked over the busy dining floor. "You ever think we'd come back from that day?" he asked softly. Marcus didn't answer immediately. "I wasn't sure," he admitted. "When I first walked in undercover, I thought I was walking into a grave. The soul of this place was gone. But it wasn't. It was buried, under silence, under fear. It just needed someone to stand up." Henry nodded. "You did more than stand up. You listened." Marcus turned to him. "And you? You never stopped showing up. Even when no one clapped. Even when they laughed behind your back." The 2 men stood in shared silence for a moment. Then Marcus placed a hand on Henry's shoulder. "I need to show you something," he said. They walked to the back office, where a small group had gathered: Sarah, Patricia, 2 senior staff, and a few local business leaders. A stack of folders sat on the desk. Marcus handed Henry one of them. "What's this?" Henry asked, confused. "The bylaws," Marcus said. "For the new non-profit arm we've built. It's official now. The Lawson Foundation is launching. Its mission is simple: to protect the invisible, defend the working poor, and uplift those who hold others up." Henry blinked slowly, his mouth opening but no words coming out. "You're the chair of the board," Marcus added. "We'll have corporate sponsors, university partners, and you'll be at the table every step of the way." I don't know what to say," Henry whispered. "Then just say yes." Henry wiped at his eyes. "Yes. Yes, 1,000 times, yes." Applause broke out in the small room. Sarah rushed forward to hug her father, whispering, "I'm proud of you. So proud." Outside, the diner buzzed with life, kids laughing, workers in scrubs sipping early coffees, and the newest hire, a 63-year-old woman recently evicted and sleeping in her car, being trained by Henry himself. She hadn't smiled in days. But when Henry patted her shoulder and said, "Your family now," she cried quietly and nodded. Because this wasn't just a job. It was a lifeline. It was a place where second chances weren't earned through perfection, but offered through love. Later that week, Marcus gave a speech at a local business summit. It wasn't flashy. He didn't talk about revenue or expansion metrics. He told a story. About a man in a trailer. A man mocked, ignored, and framed. But who never stopped being good. He ended with this. "In every city, there are Henrys. They scrub your dishes. Sweep your floors. Nod politely while the world moves past them. But kindness is never wasted. It echoes. It multiplies. And when you choose to fight for people like that, you don't just save them. They save you." The room stood and applauded. Some had tears in their eyes. Others made quiet vows to look closer, listen harder, lead better. Because they finally understood what Marcus had discovered the moment he overheard that cruel whisper at the counter. The real test of leadership isn't how you handle profit, but how you protect the powerless. In a world full of noise, true echo brings you stories that matter. Stories like Henry's, where dignity triumphs over cruelty, and quiet kindness rewrites an entire future. If this story moved you, share it. Let someone out there know that even when the world feels unfair, there are still places, and people, who will fight for what's right. And remember, Justice isn't loud. It's steady. And sometimes, it wears an apron. Subscribe, comment, and share this video. Because somewhere out there, another Henry Lawson is still washing dishes, and waiting to be seen.